The Mamiya Sekor 1000 DTL, introduced in 1968. In this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus, I will explain all the features, controls, and how to use this vintage 35mm SLR. I recently bought this camera on eBay for $35. It came with a 55mm 1.8 lens, original box, ever-ready case, neck strap, and even the instruction manual. It's in excellent condition. Before we begin, if you like videos on vintage cameras and lenses, please subscribe to my channel. Also, I'm always looking for suggestions for future videos. If you have any, please leave your ideas in the comments below. Okay, so I'm going to start where I always start when doing one of these camera videos, on the upper right side as you hold the camera. Okay, so we're going to start with the shutter speed dial. It has speeds from 1 second all the way up to 1/1000th of a second. Plus bulb. The shutter speed dial does not rotate completely around, so if you have to go from 1/1000th to bulb, you got to turn it the other way. Okay, and when it's set to B for bulb, you press the shutter release. The shutter will remain open until you release it. This is good for long time exposures, and you should always use a locking cable release when doing that. You also note that speed of 1/60th of a second is in red. That is your flash sync speed for electronic flash. It's the maximum speed you can use to sync your camera with electronic flash. You'll also note on the shutter speed dial you have your ASA setting. We call it ISO today. You just lift it and you can set your ISO speed. Okay? A little hard to see. The numbers are very small. And we're going to set it to 400. It has a range from ISO of 25 up to 3200. To the right of the shutter speed dial, we have the shutter release. It is threaded for a cable release. And as I said earlier, when using the bulb setting on the shutter speed dial, you should use a locking cable release. To the right of the shutter release, we have our advance lever. It's a 180-degree throw, or you could use several smaller strokes. And it advances the film, cocks the shutter, and advances the frame counter, which you see here in this window just above the advance lever. Okay, one other thing concerning the advance lever. When you pull the advance lever out to the position you see here, it turns on the meter. To turn off the meter and stow the advance lever, you just press on the top of the advance lever and you will see the advance lever goes back to its home position. Okay, so we pull it out to turn on the meter. We press the button to turn off the meter and to stow the advance lever. We also have here a film plane indication. That's used mainly for macro photography. And it's just where you need to know the exact location of the film plane. All right, let's come to the front of the camera. Let's just make sure the shutter's cocked. Okay, it is. And we see here the only thing we have on this side is a self-timer. To use the self-timer, you just push it towards the lens, and you must have it set at least 90 degrees from the home position. And you will notice a little button here. We press that button, and it counts down. And it's about 5 or 6 seconds at that position. We could also, let's cock the shutter again. We could also turn it all the way down, and it gives us 10 seconds. And that's a full 180 degrees from the stowed position. Now, one other thing with the self-timer. Let's say we set the self-timer Okay, let's cock the shutter again. Let's say we set the self-timer, and then we decide, oh, I don't really want to use the self-timer. I don't want to get in this picture, or I don't need the self-timer. You could just press the shutter release and release the shutter. And then before cocking the shutter again, just press that button and it'll go back to its stowed position without wasting a frame. Okay, let's come over to the other side of the camera, and then we're going to talk about the lens. And this is a unique feature of this camera at the time. The only other camera I know of that had this feature was the Ricoh TLS 401. And what it is a setting, a switch, to go from averaging meter, where the meter looks at the entire scene and gives you an average reading. But this camera also has a spot meter setting. You just move this switch to the top, just push it up, and you will now have the ability to do spot readings. Push it back down, and it's back to averaging metering. So this has two metering systems in it. The averaging meter uses 2 CDS cells. The spot metering uses 1. And Mamiya made a big deal out of this. In their ads, they said the creative choice, meaning you could either use averaging or spot. And that is what the DTL stands for, dual through the lens metering. Okay, and we'll talk more about the metering once we go through the lens mount and a few other features on the camera. Okay, this camera takes M42 screw mount lenses. Very popular. Many cameras took those lenses. Probably most notable of all was the Pentax Spotmatic. And to remove a lens, you just unscrew it. Okay, there are a ton of lenses available for this camera. Okay, so now let's just put the lens back on. Again, very easy. It's slower than a bayonet mount, but it does give you the option of many different lenses. Okay, on the top left, oh, one other thing. On this side of the camera, we have our contacts for flash. The top one is for bulbs, the bottom is for electronic flash. It's marked with a red X. Very important, if you're using electronic flash, make sure you plug it into this bottom terminal. Okay, if you plug it into the top, the flash will not sync with the shutter. Okay, let's come back to the top. Very simple. On the top left, we have our rewind knob, and we unfold our rewind crank. And it has a little arrow, maybe a little hard to see right here, shows you the direction. When you're going to rewind film, you turn it in a clockwise direction. Okay, now I think it's probably a good time to talk about the meter, and then we'll get into the bottom of the camera and how to load film. Okay, as I said, this camera has a dual metering system. And I'm going to show you a picture. It's impossible for me to show you the actual viewfinder, but I can show you a representation of it from the camera manual. So let's do that now. Here we have a representation from the manual of the viewfinder. And let's just go over the viewfinder real quick, and then we'll talk about the meter. You see in the center here, we have a micro prism spot and a surrounding circle. Okay, on the right, we see a needle and a plus sign and a minus sign. That reverse C, when that needle is centered in that reverse C, you have proper exposure. Okay, so the averaging meter meters the entire screen. The spot meter meters this little section you see here. It's 6% of the viewfinder. So it's a pretty narrow spot metering system. You will also notice here, right now, this arrow is pointed to the S for spot metering. If we had the switch on the front of the camera set to average, it would point to this area here, to the A. Okay? Pretty simple. That's all the information you have in the viewfinder. Unlike modern cameras, it doesn't show you your aperture or your shutter speed. This camera uses stop-down metering. Oh, one other thing, let me just say. This area here is a little dark. Looking through the viewfinder, it remains dark, whether you have it set to spot or average. Okay, let's go back to the camera now. So how do you meter, okay? So I said earlier, the advance lever has to be out. Okay, let's just cock the shutter. Okay, has to be out. And by turning either your shutter speed dial or your aperture ring, you will center that needle that I showed you a few seconds ago. However, to do that, you must press in and hold in the advance lever. Okay, and then you may adjust your aperture or your shutter speed to center that needle. What happens when you press in this advance lever is it stops down the lens to the aperture you have set. Because this camera, as all M42 screw mount cameras, use what's called stop down metering. So you are metering at the working aperture. One issue with that is it darkens the viewfinder. If you have the lens set to f11, let's say, the view through that viewfinder is going to be pretty dark. But the nice thing with this camera is, as soon as you let go, after metering, after centering the needle, you let go of the advance lever, the aperture opens up to full aperture. And then when you press the shutter release, it closes down at the moment of exposure. So it's a really nice system, unlike the systems on some other cameras that use stop-down metering. Okay, and then to turn off the meter, and it's important to turn off the meter, otherwise the battery will drain. As I showed you earlier, you just press that button on the top of the advance lever. Okay, there's mounting points here for a neck strap. Okay, on both the left and the right side. All right, let's look at the bottom of the camera. And we're going to say one more thing about the viewfinder, and then let's turn it this way. All right, so let's look at the bottom of the camera. We have our rewind button. After you finish the roll, you press this button in. It stays in, make sure it stays in, and then you rewind your film. We have a tripod mount here. This is where you would attach your tripod. And we have the battery compartment cover. Now, one of the other nice things about this camera was kind of ahead of its time. It used a 1.5 volt S76 battery, which is a silver battery. Most, if not all cameras at that time, and remember this came out in 1968, they used a mercury battery, which are no longer made. If you buy one of these vintage SLRs, that takes a mercury battery, well, you're going to need to use a substitute battery, or you're going to need to have the internal circuitry modified. So it's really nice that this camera takes a silver battery. Now, I put in a silver battery and the meter does not work. However, I did a little research, and it turns out there's a wire that comes loose. And I've seen a video on how to do it. I don't know if I'm going to try to do it, because I really don't shoot much film anymore. This is just a classic camera that I always wanted to own, and I thought I would buy one. One other thing with respect to the viewfinder, this camera obviously does not have a hot shoe. Most cameras back then didn't, but it did take a cold shoe, and it actually will take the same cold shoe that the Pentax Spotmatic takes. Okay, and this is a Pentax cold shoe. It just slides in. You just press these two little buttons here on the end, and it slides in over the viewfinder. I'm not going to do that now because in the angle I have to do this and show you, it makes it difficult to remove. But it just slides right in, and then you just hold in those two buttons to remove it. All right, so now we're going to load a roll of film. And one thing that's very important, before you open the back, always make sure there is no film loaded in the camera. And a very easy way to do that is to just unfold your rewind crank and just turn it a little bit. If it turns freely, real easily, no resistance, there's no film in the camera. Okay, because if you open the back of the camera when there's film inside, you're going to expose the film. So to open the back, you just push up on this here. Let's use a fingernail. And it opens. Okay, we're going to push up on the rewind shaft. And we take our roll of film and push down the rewind knob. Now, you don't want to touch the shutter curtains. They're cloth, but you don't want to touch them. You put some pressure on it. You could poke a hole through it, possibly. We're going to push the leader of the film into one of these slots. All right. It's a little hard to do this at the angle I am in. Okay, but you make sure it gets in there. Okay, so push it in, and then operate your advance lever. And what you want to make sure, there we go. You want to make sure that the sprocket holes engage the sprocket drive in the camera, okay, both top and bottom. We then close the back, okay, and we're going to make 2 blanks, all right, to get to number 1, to get rid of that exposed film, the leader and the film behind it. I want you to make note of the rewind knob as I advance the film. You see how it's turning? That's 1 blank, 2 blanks. All right, now we're ready for frame number 1. Now, if this rewind knob is not turning as you advance film, that means that the leader did not catch in the take-up spool. And you must open the back of the camera and do it over. Because if it doesn't catch, the film will not be advancing, and you'll be taking a bunch of pictures, but not recording it on the film. It happened to me one time many years ago, and never happened again. I was always careful after that. Again, make sure if you're not going to be using the camera right away, you just press the button on the top of the advance lever to turn off the meter. Okay, so now you've taken 36 great pictures, we hope, and you need to unload your camera, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is turn the camera over and press in the rewind button, which I showed you a little earlier. Okay, make sure it stays in. Turn the camera back right side up, and you're going to unfold your rewind crank and just turn it in the direction of the arrow in a clockwise position. Now you will feel resistance, right? Because the film is going from the take-up spool back into the cassette. Now I'm not going to wind this completely in. Hopefully you heard that little click. That means that the film pulled off the take-up spool. So I'm going to open the back and take it out. Now normally you wouldn't do this, you would rewind it all of the way in. The reason I'm doing this is this is just a roll I use to demonstrate loading and unloading a camera. Okay, let me close the back. If you're going to load another roll, obviously you won't close the back, you'll just get that other roll and put it into the camera, but we finished. Now you will either process the film yourself or send it off to the lab for processing. And anxiously await for those pictures to be returned to you. So it's a pretty simple camera with an advanced feature, that dual metering system, which, like I said, there was only one other camera to my knowledge that had both spot and averaging metering. So that is it for this camera, this Mamiya Sekor 1000 DTL. There was also a 500 DTL. It also had the spot and averaging meter. It just had a top shutter speed of a 500th of a second. I don't believe it had a self timer, but similar camera. Quality of this camera is excellent in my opinion. Seems to be very well made, all metal construction. And if you're looking for a vintage camera, especially when you can find them at such a good price. So like I said, I paid $35 for it. I have not tested the lens yet. I will be doing that. Actually, it's easy to adapt these lenses, actually pretty much almost any lens, to modern mirrorless cameras. So I will be doing a test of this lens on my Nikon Z8 in the near future. Okay, so that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions or comments on this video, please leave them in the comments below. And as I said at the beginning of this video, if you have any ideas for videos, something you'd like to see me do, please leave that in the comments as well. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so I will talk to you then.